Hello, my name is Taya Graham, and welcome to the Police Accountability Report. As I never get tired of saying, this show has a single purpose, holding the politically powerful institution of policing accountable. And we don't achieve this goal by focusing solely on the bad behavior of individual cops. Instead, we dissect the system that makes bad policing possible. And today, we're going to achieve this goal by examining one of the most powerful tools of that system, which is often overlooked, the idea of a lawful order and that violence can be used to enforce it. But before I get started, I want you watching to know that if you have evidence of police misconduct, please email it to us privately at par@therealnews.com, and we might be able to investigate for you. And of course, you can message me directly at Taya's Baltimore on Facebook or Twitter, and please like, share, and comment on our videos. It really does help us, and you know I read your comments and appreciate them. Now, for almost a year, we've been covering a phenomena known as auditing. Some call it cop watching, others define it as accountability reporting. Whatever your definition, it is a process that hundreds of people across the country are armed with cameras and they take part in it every day. And one of those cop watchers, Blind Justice, has caught the attention of this show several times, not so much because of a specific video or encounter with a cop, but it's what his story says about how much police wield power using a single idea. It's a concept that to a certain extent underlies the entire debate on American policing. Defined in its simplest terms, it's the idea that regardless of circumstance, police have the right to give orders. And regardless of whether or not those orders are lawful, they can enforce compliance using violence. We've seen a revealing example of this kind of power in body camera footage released last week as part of a civil rights lawsuit against the Windsor, Virginia police. The incident occurred in December of 2020 when Lieutenant Karen Nazario was pulled over for having temporary tags on his newly purchased SUV. Nazario had driven several blocks after police had tried to detain him in an area that he believed was too dark. But shortly after he stopped in a well-lit gas station, a harrowing encounter occurred. Let's watch.
How many occupants are in the vehicle?
What's going on?
How many occupants are in your vehicle?
It's only myself. Why are your weapons drawn? What's going on?
Open the door slowly and step out. Open the door.
I'm not getting out the vehicle. What's going on?
Get out of the car.
Keep your hands outside the window.
My hands are right here. What's going on?
Get out of the car now.
Get out of the car.
What's
now.
going on?
Get out of the car now. Get out of the car now.
I'm serving this country and this is how I'm treated?
Yo, what? Guess what? I'm a veteran too. I don't obey.
That's
Get out of the car. Get out of the car now.
What's going on?
Get out of the car now. Get out of the car.
Sir, just get out of the car.
You received an order. Obey it.
I'm honestly afraid to get out. Can I?
Yeah, you
ask
should
what's
be.
going-
Get out. Get out now.
I have not committed any crimes.
You're being stopped for a traffic violation. You're not cooperating at this point right now. You're under arrest.
For a traffic-
You're being detained. Okay. You're being detained for
For a
obstruction of justice.
traffic violation, I do not have to get out the vehicle. You haven't even told me why I'm being stopped.
Really?
Get your hands.
Get out of the car now. Get out of the car.
And that is the question this body camera footage raises. Where does this sense of power come from? Why does a police officer believe, as we can see here, that an order he or she gives is not only absolute, but subject to deadly force if not followed? Bear in mind, the idea that police have the authority to order anyone to do anything is highly questionable. In fact, the powers we have bestowed upon police are expressly restricted in the Constitution. And even more disturbing, why do police assume their so-called orders come with a penalty for not complying that can be administered from the barrel of a gun? And that's the topic we're going to unpack today. And as always, we're going to explore this idea by example, not necessarily by analyzing another troubling instance of police overreach, but as I alluded to at the beginning of the show, looking at the bizarre case of a controversial cop watcher who challenged the very foundation of police power and has paid for it ever since. As we mentioned at the beginning of the show, the case that offers us a window into the origin of this idea of unfettered police power involves Blind Justice. Last week, we covered the preliminary hearing of the cop watcher and disability auditor in Rockingham County, North Carolina. It was a preliminary hearing on charges related to, and you guessed it, failure to obey an order. The case stemmed from this encounter with a Madison, North Carolina police officer who accosted Blind Justice and his wife as they were sitting in a church parking lot playing Pokemon Go. There, they were approached by an officer who immediately asked Blind Justice, the visually impaired passenger, for ID. When he refused to do so, the situation quickly escalated. Let's watch.
What is the reason? I'm about to bust your window out. Give me your
Okay,
ID.
that's illegal.
No, it's illegal. Give me your IDs now.
What is the reason you're asking for the ID? Can you tell us the reason?
I'm afraid to
please don't
afraid
smash.
to put my hand down. Listen, I'm afraid to put my hand down because I don't want you to say that
Roll the window down. That's all.
It's cold.
One.
Please don't
stop.
smash the window.
Please don't smash my window. I don't want to reach
Please
down.
stop. Please stop.
Stop.
What do you need?
What do you want? Are you?
Can you help?
us?
Can you
help
stop?
me,
The
please?
encounter led to an arrest, and it is that case that has dragged on for almost a year and led to serious consequences for him that reveals a truism that underlies all police power. And for more on that, I'm joined by my reporting partner, Stephen Janis. Stephen, thank you so much for joining me.
Taya, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So, Stephen, we were both in the courtroom for the preliminary hearing, and I was struck by how the prosecutors mentioned an incident involving Blind Justice where he held up a sign saying, "Fuck the cops." You also spoke to Blind Justice. What did he have to say about it?
Well, I mean, the thing that was interesting is that the prosecutor kind of tied together this idea of protesting with the idea that Blind Justice was hostile to law enforcement because he wouldn't obey a direct order. So it's kind of like he tied the two, both protesting and following police orders, as like, hey, if you don't follow police orders, it means somehow you're anti-cop. And he kept phrasing it as anti-cop. He's anti-police. He's anti-cop, which I thought was interesting rhetoric because it has nothing to do with the law. There's nothing part of the law that says, hey, if you're anti-cop, you can't do X, Y, and Z. But that's the case he was making. We spoke to Blind Justice a little bit about why he does what he does. Let's listen.
So, I mean, it's been a year for a Pokemon stop. Why do you think the prosecutor's still pursuing this case? Isn't there other crime going on?
I mean, there is other crime going on, but it's relatively low. I think you guys reported on that already with, Madison and the really low crime rate, but they have a really large police department. It's the majority of the public employees in Madison are the police. It's a system made to generate revenue and to teach people that you cannot challenge the power structure here. And I think a big part of it is there's a statute of limitations on filing civil suit against all these different actors that have violated not just me, but my wife, my children, several other people that have gone out protesting, all of our civil liberties. So I think they're trying to drag it out as much as possible. So then that date passes and I can't file that suit against them.
And, and you can tell Madison has a ton of cops, right?
Yeah, they have something like 30-something cops. No, I'm just taking that back. They have like 17 cops. The total city has maybe 30 employees, so it's over half of the employees of the town are police.
Problem in search of a solution, or a solution in search of a problem.
You can say that. We haven't gotten anywhere trying to hold the local police accountable with the chief of police. The old chief of police expedited his retirement after that incident with his officers.
So as you can see, it's really a way of casting doubt on his civil rights or any of his constitutional rights.
Now, you spoke to his attorney after he tried to get the case moved from Rockingham County. He tried to get a change of venue. Can you talk about his concerns?
Well, the attorney didn't want to comment on the case that was ongoing, but he did make an argument in court about how he was concerned that there was a lot of antipathy towards Blind Justice in Rockingham County would make it difficult for him to get a fair trial. But he did talk a little bit about why he feels it's important to take this case in general because of Blind Justice and his ability to protest. Let's listen.
All of his protests are peaceful. They are seeking the truth, and he wants to see change like people who are protesting all over the country right now. He's seen resistance in his former hometown of Madison in the form of counter-protesters that have become violent, who have organized and held multi-day actions specifically targeted at him.
So as you can see, I mean, this is a classic First Amendment case and a classic case where the First Amendment seems to be pitted against the power of policing.
Why is the simple act of asking for ID so intrinsic to police power? Why is it so critical? Why can police make dubiously lawful orders and use violence to force us to comply.
Well, the key here is trying to criminalize the First Amendment and also establish and fabricate order, which is what we've talked about continually on the show, actually really disorder. Because the point is that you can't free assemble, you can't protest, you can't really exercise your constitutional right if police have the right to criminalize that association, criminalize that activity by saying, if you don't give your ID, we're going to arrest you. If you don't walk down the street, we're going to shoot you. I mean, the thing is that you see here, the ID is kind of critical because that's kind of an all-access point where you can infiltrate First Amendment rights and turn them into crimes.
Okay, just for the moment, I want to stray from considering this idea of police power within the context of legal wranglings, and instead think about it simply as a metaphor. That is, I want to examine the psychological effects of this display of state power, especially when it comes, as I said before, at the end of a barrel of a gun. It's an especially vexing question when we consider how often orders are used as a justification to escalate the use of force, and how often that escalation ends in violence and death. Perhaps we should think of it more as a type of propaganda, a sort of dramatized reenactment of the power of the state to enforce injustice and inequality by displaying it in the most unexceptional places and circumstances. That is, not just to demonstrate control over our bodies, but to demonstrate how arbitrary and capricious state power can be. In a sense, the dramatic escalations we see over and over again as police bark orders during routine traffic stops is the real rhetoric of power, the language of government-enforced disorder. It's a type of force that emphasizes how random and omnipresent state power really is, a showcase of the capability of state-sponsored violence to occupy any space at any time and govern that space with force. Consider the death of 20-year-old Dante Wright. A police officer fatally shot Mr. Wright during a traffic stop in Brooklyn Center, Minneapolis. Putting aside the police chief's claims that the shooting was accidental, the killing occurred just 10 miles from where Derek Chauvin is on trial for the killing of George Floyd. Exactly what message does this give to the community about police power? Just think about the psychological impact of what this arbitrary enforcement of laws means. Consider what a powerful form of propaganda it really is. Can we really dissent when a stop for a hard-to-read temporary license plate or a car with too many air fresheners devolves into a series of contradictory commands relayed under the duress of gunpoint? And also think about this. The agents who implement this display of power. I mean, what is a cop really? Are they well-trained legal experts? Are they experienced social workers? Are they mental health professionals? Are they philosophers? No, they are armed men and women with the power to take a life. A group of people who have been given wide and almost unfettered discretion to confiscate our freedom, even if it is later deemed illegal. And if indeed we fight these illegal acts through the court system, they are afforded what's known as qualified immunity, which simply means their individual actions often result in few consequences, if any. But all of this is intentional. It's a process of omnipresent enforcement that proscribes how we experience power, how we perceive it, and ultimately why we are forced to concede to it. I want you to really think about what we see when we watch these videos of troubling police behavior. How many of the people in the videos that we have shared with you at the time that they are constrained by cops have committed a crime or serious infraction that threatens public safety? How many have threatened someone with a gun or committed a violent act? None of them. And yet they all ended up with a modern-day scarlet letter, a criminal record. All ended up with court fees and mandatory court appearances. Some ended up having to pay bail and a lawyer. And worse yet, some paid with their lives. The point is that arbitrary police power, the barking of random order, and the pointing of guns to subdue an errant driver is intentional. The omnipresence of law enforcement in all of our civic spaces is a strategy designed to communicate the lack of restraint, pretext, or consent to police power. It's a type of psychic propaganda, an ongoing lesson that our bodies and our minds have no agency or presumption of innocence under the auspices of the badge. I mean, who in their right mind, dedicated to liberty and justice, would allow a system like this not just to exist, but to thrive? Who would contemplate that aiding and abetting the ability of random men and women to enforce phantom and fickle laws on personal whims would result in anything but chaos? It is, put simply, the propaganda of police power writ large. an ongoing demonstration of how few rights we have and just how easily they can be erased in an instant. Well, that's why we produce this show, to expose the root cause of these abuses. And that's why we will continue to hold that power accountable any way that we can. I want to thank my guest, Blind Justice, for taking the time to speak with us and for sharing his experience with the legal system. And of course, I have to thank intrepid journalist Stephen Janis for his writing, research, reporting, and editing on this piece. Thank you, Stephen.
Taya, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And I want to thank friend of the show, Noli D, for her support. Thanks, Noli D. And I want you watching to know that if you have evidence of police misconduct or brutality, please share it with us and we might be able to investigate. Please reach out to us. You can email us tips privately at par@therealnews.com and share your evidence of police misconduct. You can also message us at Police Accountability Report on Facebook or Instagram, or at Eyes on Police on Twitter. And of course, you can always message me directly at Taya's Baltimore on Twitter or Facebook. And of course, I do read your YouTube comments and appreciate them. And I try to answer your questions whenever I can. My name is Taya Graham, and I am your host of the Police Accountability Report. Please be safe out there.